Hi, it's Christina with the Sisyphean Journal, and today's the anniversary of the death of Sharon Hamplton. And there are kind of two key points here. Well, really three key points here. One is the appalling quality of care at many abortion clinics. One is the absolute indifference to the woman once the abortion's done. And the third is the abortion rights response when a woman dies because of that appalling indifference. So I'm going to link below to the full video about Sharon's death and the blog post about Sharon's death. But Sharon's death has a precursor that's very, very important. When I was at Life Dynamics, I listened to hours and hours and hours of tapes of National Abortion Federation meetings and risk management seminars. And I wish I could remember which doctor it was. There was some kind of discussion about proper treatment of complications, and he said that when he pulled bowel, which is just what it sounds like, they reach in with the forceps to grab parts of the baby and pull them off. Sometimes they'll poke a hole in the back of the uterus and they'll grab a loop of the woman's intestines and pull it out and go, oops. And basically, he said that when he did this, he'd stuff it back through the hole. He would give the woman extra drugs to kind of constrict the uterus tighter to stop that hole from bleeding, keep her a little bit longer in recovery to keep an eye on her, and then send her home none the wiser. And Michael Burnhill, who was then medical director of Planned Parenthood, ripped this guy a new one. And he reviewed what you're supposed to do to make sure that you haven't performed a life-threatening injury to the woman's bowel. And then he said, how many of you do this? And he counted 6 people who raised their hands. This is at the National Abortion Federation. This is the cream of the crop. This is the people who actually care enough to spend money on a medical membership and then go to these meetings to supposedly learn how to perform abortions the most safely. What's it like for people who don't even care enough to go to those meetings? And Bruce Steir, who performed Sharon's fatal abortion, was a member of the National Abortion Federation. He was one of that cadre of top of the line, we really care about safety abortionists, in theory. Okay, so there's that. There's stuff it back through the hole and hope she doesn't find out about it. Is this acceptable? Evidently so. I'll get to that. So, Sharon Hamplton, against her mother's wishes, she was working part-time at a Burger King and she was attending community college, and she wanted to better her life for herself and her 3-year-old son, Curtis. So when she got pregnant, she went to a Ladies' Choice Women's Medical Center for her abortion on December 13th of 1996. The doctor was already on probation with the medical board. Bruce Steir had a history of botching abortions, including causing uterine perforations. That's when you poke a hole in the uterus. He'd been found negligent in 6 abortion cases, including one where the woman had to have a hysterectomy. One woman had to have a fetal skull removed from a tear in her uterus. And Joseph Durante, who owned the facility, was also on probation with the medical board at the time of Sharon's abortion. He had attempted an abortion that resulted in the birth of a live but injured infant. And Sharon's mother said that she's not sure who referred Sharon to this clinic. It was either San Bernardino County Social Services or a Dr. Kreider. So somebody referred her to a clinic owned and operated by somebody on probation with the medical board who botched abortions, and somebody else performing the abortion who was on probation with the medical board and still performing abortions. So they were referring to, just like people were referring to Kermit Gosnell, that the only criteria for a referral seems to be they're willing to do the abortion. Anything else is icing on the cake. So, Doris, Sharon's mother, said that she did not understand that this was not an accredited ambulatory surgical office. And that's another thing. Let's bring up thing number 4. How often do you hear the abortion lobby complain about fake clinics and, oh, those fake clinics that lie to women and endanger them when they refer to pro-life pregnancy centers? But these places that are not actually clinics, not licensed, but advertising as if they're a clinic, giving all the illusions of being a clinic when they're not actually a clinic and they're not being overseen. Those legitimately fake clinics that kill women, big fat hairy deal. Who possibly cares? They do abortions. That's all we need to know. And Doris said she never would have brought Sharon to such a place. So now, during the abortion, Nancy Miles, who was the ultrasound technician who was assisting, and this is where they hold the ultrasound probe. They're trying to reduce the chances that you're going to reach through the back of the uterus and grab bowel by letting the doctor see what he's grabbing. He can see the forceps going in. He can see he's got an arm, he's got a leg, he's got the head. So they're having to move the ultrasound wand. And what is that like? Think about that. Your job is to hold this wand so this squirming baby can get its arms and legs torn off and its little head crushed. That's got to be one of the most ghoulish jobs in the world. So she said that Steir got a weird look on his face and said, I think I pulled bowel. And he remained at the facility for less than an hour after Sharon's abortion. She was still in the recovery room when he left. So there was no doctor on the premises, not even a bad doctor overseeing Sharon's care. Sharon's mother went in. Her daughter looked absolutely ghastly. The staff put her in a wheelchair because she was too weak to walk. Pushed the wheelchair out to her mother's car. And Sharon bled to death in the back seat on the drive home. Now, because the staff member said, Steir said he pulled bowel, somehow this did come to the attention of the authorities, and they charged Steir with murder. Now, did the abortion rights movement rally around Doris for the loss of her daughter? Did they believe women? Did they trust this woman? Hell no. This guy who was on probation with the medical board, had a history of botching abortions, said, oh, I think I pulled bowel, stuffed it back through, sent her home, she bled to death. He's a hero. Oh, and they started a defense fund for this man. Now, pro-lifers, when there's an abortion death, they do things like when Carolina Gutierrez died in Florida, they paid for her funeral because her family was too poor to afford it. They stood behind the woman's family because the woman actually matters to them. But the abortion lobby rallied around the man who killed Sharon, rallied around the clinic that put a dying woman in a wheelchair and shoved her out the door to bleed to death. Okay, and this isn't the only case. New Year's Eve in the late 1980s, Arnold Bickham had to practically pick, what was her name? It wasn't Sophie McCoy. Sophie McCoy was in New York. Can't remember her name. But he practically had to pick her up and put her in a wheelchair, shoved her out the door. Her mom drove her to the hospital, but she bled to death. And again, no problem. Did the abortion happen? Yeah, good enough. Pro-choice citizens, you need to grasp that this is what the abortion lobby, the politicians, the activists, not the people just carrying signs, but the people who are strategizing, the people who are coming up with policy, the people who are writing the laws, the people who are telling you what to think that this is good enough. And unless you think it's good enough, you need to withdraw your support from these people and stop believing what they tell you. You need to stand up for women like Sharon and not quacks like Steir.